In this tutorial, we will have a look how we can make this jump. So if I press down space key on my keyboard, as you can see, we are jumping. We just playing our jump. As you can see, we jumping. So we're gonna take a look on this, how we can make this one. And before I jump into this tutorial, I want to thanks ShioriPlayz and Rajat Sharma for donating on YouTube. You can do on Patreon as well, and by that you will unlock many benefits. And also I have some courses on Udemy. Make sure you check that out because those are beginner friendly. So now let's dive into this jump tutorial. So let's dive into it. To make our jump, what we will do, we're gonna create a point somewhere over here, a feet of this player game object. We're gonna create a circle, and if that circle collide with this ground or this ground tile, then we're gonna jump, else we're not gonna jump when we in the air. So let's create a script for that. So I'm gonna move over to my project tab, assets, and then a script folder. Let's move over to our script folder. Over here I have, let's right click there, create mono behavior script, and you can name that script to something like player jump. I already created a player jump script, and you can take a look over here. So I'm gonna select my player to game object in the hierarchy, and let's drag this player jump script to this add component section, and let's open up the player's jump script by double clicking on it. So as you can see, by default we have the start and update function. So what I'm gonna do, we're gonna move over to this update function, and over here we're gonna check for some input. So let's use this if condition. Let's make first bracket and some curly brackets, and what we want to check over here, we're gonna check input. So we will use this input dot get key, sorry, input dot get key down, and let's make this first bracket, and you can check for any key you like. So I'm gonna check for key code dot space. So what this basically means, it's basically means if input dot get key code dot space basically means if we press down space key on our keyboard, then whatever we're gonna do inside this curly bracket will be execute. So let's make a function for our to jump. For function we're gonna type this void, and we're gonna call this function to something like jump. Let's make first bracket and some curly brackets, and let's for now we're gonna print out a message if it's working perfectly or not. So I'm gonna type this debug.log, and let's say something like player jump, and let's close that off with semicolon, and let's call the function over here when we're gonna press down space key. So let's call the jump function there, and let's make first bracket, close that off with semicolon. So if input dot get key down key code dot space is basically means if we press down space key, then what we doing, we just calling the jump function. And what jump function is really doing, it's just printing out the message in the console says player jump. So whenever we're gonna press down on our keyboard space key, this message just gonna pop up because we calling this function, and this function just doing these things. Let's also create a second parameter which just gonna keep track of if this player is standing on this ground or not. So we're gonna create a bool parameter. So let's go to script, and over in the top of our class, it doesn't need to be public, so we're gonna make it instead private, and that will be bool, which can be true or false. And we're gonna simply call this one to something like is ground. Sorry, I'm gonna call this is ground, and let's close that up with semicolon, and let's move over to this start function. So this start function get called in the start of the game, and in the start of the game I'm gonna set this is ground equals to true. Why I set it equal to true, because as soon we're gonna start our game, this player will be top of this ground or just gonna be on this ground. So that's why is ground I set it to true in the start of the game. And over here, so when we press down space key on our keyboard, at the same time I also want to check if we standing on that ground or not. So for that we need to use this and we're gonna check second condition, and we will check is ground is equals to true. It's basically means we just standing on the ground. If we press down space key on our keyboard, at the same time is ground is true, basically means we just standing on this ground. So then what we doing, we just calling the jump function, and jump function just gonna print out the print out this message. And after jumping, we do know we're gonna be in the air somewhere, so we're not gonna be top of this ground. So that's why after jumping or leaving the ground, we're gonna set this is ground parameter to false. Why we set it to false? Because once we're gonna jump, we're gonna be in the air, so that's why is ground I just set it equal to false, because we're not gonna be top of our ground. So after jumping, I just firstly calling the jump function, which is just printing out the message, and after that I just set is ground to false, means we're not gonna be in the air, sorry, in the ground, we're gonna be in the air. And now let's press down Ctrl S on our keyboard in order to save our code, and let's move to Unity now, and you will see. So just wait a little moment and you will see that as soon as we're gonna press down space key on our keyboard, that message just gonna pop up in our console tab. And after popping up the second time, that message not gonna pop up. Why? Because after jumping, we do know we just gonna leave our ground, so that's why we just setting is ground to false, means we not standing on that ground. So that's why we just set is ground parameter equal to false. And if I select my console tab and then click on this play button, you will see as soon as we're gonna press down space key on our keyboard, for the first time we will able to print out that message in our console tab, and second time we're not gonna able to do it. I'm gonna show you. So let's if I press down, sorry, I'm gonna get out of play mode, and I'm gonna turn down my volume of the game. And now if we click on this play button in the top, it should be fine. So just wait a little moment and you will see that. So if I press down space key on my keyboard, just wait a little moment. So if I press my space key, as you can see, as soon I press space key in our console tab, the message just getting pop up says player jump. But the problem is that we're not able to see that message for the next time. So let's get out of play mode. Why we not able to do it? Because if we move over to unit C# script, we can see that for the first time we do know that this is ground parameter is true in the start of the game we setting. And after that, once we press down space key for the first time, jump, we just calling the jump function, and then we just setting the is ground to false. And we do know that once we press down next time keyboard on our space key on our keyboard, so this condition is true. But the problem is that this condition is not true at all, because after printing out that message, we just set this is ground parameter to false. It's not true at all. And this and condition check both of this condition is true, then whatever we're gonna do inside this curly bracket will be just gonna execute. And we do know that once we jump for the first time, this is ground, we just setting it to false, setting it to false after jumping, as you can see. So this condition over here is false, but this one is true. So that's why we're not able to call this jump function next time, because in this n condition, both of these conditions should be true, else whatever we're gonna do inside this curly bracket will not be execute. But instead of printing out message, what we really want to do, we just want this player to make jump. So what we need a reference of this rigid body 2D component of this player game object, then we can able to make our jump. Why? Because this rigid body 2D component is responsible for like velocity, adding force, and all kind of those things. So we need a reference of this rigid body 2D game the component of this player game object, and then we're gonna make we're gonna able to jump. So let's go to our script and let's go to top of our class, and let's grab the reference first. So let's make public, and the component we're looking for is a rigid body 2D, and we're gonna call it simply RB, or short for rigid body 2D. And let's press down Ctrl S to save our script, and let's move over to Unity. So underneath our player jump script, we will able to see a RB field will appear, which we named it. So into that slot, what we need to do, we need to drag the rigid body 2D component into that slot. So we're gonna have the reference, and after that we can just make our player jump. So just wait and you will see. Wait a little moment, and now the script gets compiled, and underneath our player jump script we can see RB and it says non-rigid body 2D. So let's take our rigid body 2D component and let's drag it into that field, and now we have the player 2 rigid body 2D component reference. And now let's open up the player jump script, and we're gonna remove this message. Instead of printing out message, we really want this player may able to make jump in the y-axis. So to do so, we're gonna create a vector2, and we're gonna call this one velocity. So sorry, we're gonna call this one velocity, and we're gonna set equal to rb dot linear velocity. So what we simply doing, we basically going over to the this rigid body 2D component and just taking the linear velocity of this rigid body 2D component of this player game object, and we storing that velocity into this vector2 velocity, which just gonna have x-axis and y-axis. So this velocity just gonna have x-axis and y-axis. So what we will do now, we're gonna access the y-axis velocity dot y. We can access the x, but we don't want our player to jump in the x-axis, so we're gonna remove that. Instead we're gonna access the y-axis, and we will set equal to some number. So let's make a variable for our jump as well. So let's go to top of our class, let's make a public float, and we can call this one to something like jump height. So let's call it jump height, and by default I'm gonna set something like 6.5 if, and let's close that up with semicolon, and I'm gonna set velocity dot y equal to jump height. And after doing that, make sure you just go to a rigid body 2D, basically RB, and we're gonna access the linear velocity, and we will set equal to our velocity. So what we firstly doing, we're just taking the linear velocity of this rigid body 2D component, as you can see, and we just storing that into this velocity parameter, this vector2 velocity parameter, which is gonna have x-axis and y-axis. So we just only accessing the y of this player. So if I select this move tool, we only accessing the y, and we just setting equal to jump height, which by default we set 6.5. So this will be 6.5, means our player will jump in the y-axis with 6.5 unit. And after that, what we're doing, we just again going or again taking the linear velocity of this rigid body 2D, as you can see, and we're setting equal to velocity after only modifying the y-axis with our jump height. So we just gonna jump in the y-axis with 6.5 unit, or that jump height parameter, around that jump height parameter. And after that, again we just going to rigid body linear velocity, and we just setting equal to velocity after modifying the y-axis only. So our player game object will jump in the y-axis with this much of jump height. So I hope you get the idea how you can do it. Now we're gonna press down Ctrl S to save our script, and let's move over to Unity, and we will able to see this player will able to jump in the y-axis with 6.5. But we do know we just made that field public, so we can adjust underneath our player jump script in the inspector tab. So just wait a little moment and you will see that. So just wait, and now our script gets compiled, and underneath our player jump script we can see jump height. So I'm gonna make it something around 7.2. So we will jump in the y-axis, so with 7.2. So let's click on this play button. We only just access the y-axis, and we just set equal to jump height. So we're not making our player jump in the x-axis, we just doing in the y-axis only, as you saw. So now if I press down on my keyboard for the first time space key, as you can see, it's just make jump. I'm gonna make the jump height a little bit high, something around 12, in order to make it visible our jump. So just wait a little moment. So if I press down space key on my keyboard, you will see this player will jump with jump height parameter. By default we set 12, so it will jump in the y-axis with 12 unit. So if I press down space key on my keyboard, as you can see, it just made the jump. But the problem is that once we press down second time on our keyboard space key, we're not able to jump at all. So let's get out of play mode. Why we not able to jump? Because we checking both of these condition. If we press down space key at the same time is ground is true, then we just making our jump. And after jumping, what we doing? We just setting is ground equal to false. And once we press down for the second time space key, we do know that this is ground parameter is not true at all. It's basically false. And this and condition just gonna check if both of this condition is true, then we will able to jump. But we do know that for the next time is ground is not true at all, it's basically false. So that's why whatever we're doing inside these curly brackets, it's not getting execute, means we're not able to jump. But what we basically need to do, we're gonna create a circle fit of this player game object, and if that circle collide with this ground, then we're gonna set is ground to true, means we just standing on this ground. And if that circle is not colliding with this ground, means this player just gonna be in the air. So in that moment, we're gonna set that is ground to false. But as soon as this player just gonna collide with this ground, basically that circle just gonna collide with this ground tile, then we're gonna set is ground to true. So we will able to jump for the next time as well. To do so, what we're gonna do, we're gonna create a circle around a feet of this player game object. To create that, we need to use this. So we're gonna go to top of our update function, and we will use this physics 2d physics 2d physics 2d dot overlap circle function, overlap circle. And this function, as a first argument, it's going to take the position from where we want to create the circle. Second thing, it's going to take the radius of that circle. And the third thing, it's going to take the layer mask, basically which game object you want to target. So in our case, we only going to target this ground. So that's why as a layer mask, we're going to choose our ground. So we need those variable. So let's make this double for let's make this comment for now, and let's go to top of our class, and let's gather those information. So the first thing, we need our position from where we want to create the circle. So let's make it public, and we're gonna make this one transform, which is responsible for position, rotation, and scale. And we can call this one something like detect point or ground checkpoint. So let's call it ground checkpoint. And the second thing, we need the radius. So let's make a public, sorry, let's make public float, and we can call this one check radius. So let's call it check radius, and by default I'm gonna set around to something like 0.2f with a pretty small number. And the third argument, it's gonna take the layer mask. So let's pass public layer mask, and we can call this one check layer, ground check layer, something like, or we can simply call what is ground. And let's close that off with semicolon. Let's press down Ctrl S to save our script, and let's move to Unity. So underneath our player jump script, we will able to see those variable, and we need to assign one by one so we can make the circle around that point. So firstly, we need to create a point fit of our player game object, and from that point we're gonna create the circle. So just wait a little moment, and once it's done, we just gonna create the circle. So I'm gonna select my player 2 game object in the hierarchy, and let's press down F in order to focus on that. Let's right click on this player 2 game object. Let's create an empty child game object, and I'm gonna call this game object to something like ground check. So let's call it ground check point. And if you want to choose an icon, then go over to inspector, click here, and I'm going to choose this gizmos, and I'm going to move this bottom of it of this player game object somewhere around here, because I'm going to create the circle around this position. And now let's select our players jump script. Let's select our ground checkpoint. Let's drag it over to this ground check point slot. And what is ground? It says nothing, so we're going to choose our ground. But before you choose your ground, make sure you just assign your ground as a ground layer. So what you basically have to do, you need to find that game object. So in my case, this is my ground tile. So I'm gonna move over to my first ground, great, and I'm gonna select this ground. So make sure you select the ground, then go over to inspector. In the top right you can say layer and it will be default. So just click there, click on add layer, then name the layer whatever you want. I already named the layer ground. And make sure you select the game object one more time, go over to inspector and assign with the layer that you recently named it. So I assigned it the ground as a ground layer, as you can notice in the inspector tab. So now we're gonna select our player jump script. And what is ground? Now I'm gonna check, I'm gonna select this ground. So the circle only gonna check for this ground, and I'm gonna move my ground checkpoint a little bit down. And let's open up our player jump script by double clicking on it. So let's remove these two slashes, forward slashes. So the first thing, it's gonna take the point from where we want to create the circle. So I'm gonna pass my ground checkpoint dot position, so we're gonna access the position. And the second thing, it's gonna take the radius, so let's pass our check radius. And the third argument, it's gonna take the layer mask, so we're gonna pass our what is ground, and we assign it that layer mask, which is what is ground, with our ground layer. And let's close that up with semicolon. So this physics2d dot overlap circle, it's gonna be true or false depending upon if the circle is really colliding with this ground or not. If it's that, then this function over here, it's gonna give us a true value, else it will give us a false value. So what we will do, we're gonna store the result into another variable, or you can simply say into another container. And that will be a collider 2D, because this physics 2D overlap circle, it's gonna work like as a collision. And we can call this one to something like call info, or you can simply say call collision information. Let's set equal to this. So this call info can be true or false depending upon if this physics 2D overlap circle is true or false. Means if the circle is colliding with this ground game object or this ground layer, then it's gonna be true, else it's gonna be false. Let's suppose it's true, then this call info just gonna be true. So in the next time, what we're gonna do, we're gonna check if call info, if call info equals to true. Sorry, call info equals to true, and let's make some curly brackets. So basically means the circle is really colliding with this ground game object. So in that moment, what we need to do, we need to set this ground, this is ground parameter to true. Why? Because if that circle collide with this ground, means we're gonna be in the ground, so it means we can able to jump. So that's why if the circle is colliding, basically means if call info is equals to true. If that is the case, means the circle is really colliding with that ground, means we need to set our is ground parameter to true. Or you can just leave like this, it's also basically means true. If that is the case, then I'm gonna set is ground equal to true. Let's if the circle is not colliding with this ground, means we are in the air. So that's why I'm gonna set else is ground, we're gonna set equal to. So is ground, let's set equal to false, means we are in the air. And now if we press down Ctrl S on our keyboard and let's move to Unity, we should able to see whenever we're gonna be on the air, in top of this ground, means the circle just gonna collide with this tile ground, then we will able to jump because we just setting is ground to true. But as soon as we leaving our ground, then we just setting is ground to false, as you can see. Basically means if the circle is not colliding with that ground, we just setting is ground to false, means we're gonna be in the air. So just wait a little moment. But the problem is that we're not able to see our circle that we created. To see the circle, we need to use another function. So let's move over to our script and let's go to bottom of our script. And we need to use this on draw gizmo selected function. And this is Unity callback function, and it's gonna draw our circle that we really want to draw. And in order to draw, we need to use this gizmos dot draw where sphere function. And this function, as a first argument, it's gonna take the point, so we're gonna pass our ground checked at point dot position. And the second thing, it's gonna take our radius, so let's pass our check radius. And then let's close that up with semicolon. but we need to check if we assign our ground checkpoint or not. Basically, if we drag it this ground checkpoint to this ground check point field underneath our player jump script, if it's, then we just want to create the circle. And let's suppose if this ground checkpoint is null, basically it's empty, means we don't have the ground checkpoint. But this function, as you can see, it's still trying to find the ground check position, and it's gonna drop with this check radius. So we do know that if we didn't assign, means that field is empty, so this function will just gonna throw us an error because it's not gonna able to find it. So before we drop, we're gonna check. So let's use if condition, and let's make first bracket and some curly brackets. And what we want to check over here, we basically want to check if ground checkpoint, if it's equals to null. Basically means this one is empty over here, we haven't dragged it yet to this field. If that is the case, then we need to stop drawing. So we're gonna type this return, and after return, whatever we're gonna do, it's not gonna be execute, means this line of code will not be execute, means the circle will be stop drawing that from that point. But we do know that we already assigned it, so this condition is false. Basically ground checkpoint is not equals to null, because we have the reference. Now it's gonna draw our circle that we want to draw, and we can choose the color, the circle, we can choose the color that we would like to draw with, the color that we would like to draw with. So we can set equal to gizmos dot color, and you can set equal to color that you like. So I'm gonna set color dot yellow, something like that. And let's press down Ctrl S, yellow, and we're gonna press down Ctrl S to save our script, and let's move to Unity. So we do know that we assign it, so that ground check equals to null, those condition just gonna be false. That condition just gonna be false, means we gonna draw the circle around our ground check point. So just wait a little moment, and you will see the circle will be drawn from this ground check point as soon as our script gets compiled, as you can see indeed. And I'm gonna move this ground check a little bit down to fit it perfectly now, and we can just play around with this check radius. So I'm gonna set equal to something like 0.1.5, something around like that. And now if we click on this play button in the top, you will see as soon as this circle just gonna collide with that tile ground, that is ground parameter gonna be true. Basically means we standing on that ground, and we do know if we standing on that ground, and we just pressing down space key, we just making our player jump. So just wait and you will see. So now if I press down space key, as you can see, whenever we standing on that ground, we can see we just making jump. But when we press down space key on our keyboard multiple times, even in the air, we're not able to jump. We only able to jump when we are grounded. Basically means if this circle that we created, if it's colliding with this ground tile, we do know that. So in that situation, what we're doing, we just setting is ground to true, as you can see. And over here we checking if we press down space key at the same time is ground is true. Basically means that circle is really colliding with this ground, or we standing on this ground. Then what we doing, we just making our player jump, and as soon as we making player jump, we're gonna be in the air. So that's why we just set is ground to false. False. But as soon as that circle just gonna collide with this ground one more time, then we just again setting this is ground to true. But if that circle is not colliding with the ground, basically means we are in the air, that we set, then we setting is ground to false, as you can see over here. So I hope you get the idea that how you can do it, how you can make your player jump in one time. Because this, and also this if condition over here we pass an n, this n checks both of this condition. Is if it's true, then whatever we're gonna do inside these curly brackets, it's gonna be execute. Just basically means we're gonna able to jump, and as soon as we jump, we're gonna be in the air, then we setting is ground to false. And once the circle colliding with that ground, basically this ground, this circle, then we just setting is ground to true, and we do know if it's ground is true. At the same time we pressing down space key, then we just making jump, and this line of code just looping over again and again. So I hope you get the idea that how you can make your player jump in Unity game engine. And lastly, thanks for watching this video. I will see you in the next video.